Welcome to the walking tour What Does Manchester Feel Like? An immersive journey designed to reveal the range of sensory experiences that shape urban life in the first industrial city. From childhood, our senses, sight, smell, taste, touch and hearing, work as a powerful toolbox to understand the world around us. In fact, recent studies have demonstrated how sound stimulation, like music and speech, can influence fetal memory and learning. This ability to discover the world through the senses does not lessen as we grow. Rather, it remains as a valuable way to experience our surroundings. Grounded in this premise, this tour will guide you through various spots in Manchester, encouraging you to perceive the city through a sensory lens. This theoretical approach, known as sensory urbanism, is an emerging field that studies the range of embodied sensations experienced in urban settings and their social, political, or economic implications. The aim, therefore, is to examine through sensory dimensions to gain deeper insights about how we interact with urban spaces. This tour covers 5 demographically distinct locations within Greater Manchester. Each stop will present the multicultural and socio-economic diversity of the city, illustrating key principles of sensory urbanism. To do so, participants will travel a total of 12.1 miles in a route designed to be accessible by bicycle, bus or private car. Depending on the chosen type of transport, the tour can be completed in 4 to 6 hours. Next, each site is briefly introduced in sequential order. The first stop is this space, located in a significant Jewish community, where 83% of the residents share the same heritage. This setting allows us to explore the role of sensory experiences in green public spaces and analyze how culture and religion can shape our perception of a neighborhood. This small space in the city centre is surrounded by a predominantly male population, with only 33.9% female residents compared to the Manchester average of 50.3%. This demographic imbalance allows us to explore how gender composition might influence collective sensory and social experiences. Formerly home to Manchester City Football Club, Moss Side is a culturally diverse place, with 47.3% of residents identifying as Black, Black British, Black Welsh, Caribbean or African. Starting in a restaurant, we will see if these diverse cultural backgrounds might contribute to the neighbourhood's sensory environment. Located south of the city centre, Longsight's population is 73.7% Asian, Asian British or Asian Welsh. This demographic profile may highlight the community's distinct sensory character, shaped by a range of traditions and practices. West Didsbury residential area. Known as one of Manchester's more affluent neighbourhoods, it reports an average annual household income of £55,000. This economic factor can help us realise how wealth and income intersect with sensory experiences. Throughout the tour, you will be guided by an informative video introducing each location, providing context and prompting reflection on the sensory qualities at play. After each fragment, there will be time to pause, explore, and engage with the environment before moving on to the next destination. This approach aims to deepen your understanding of how sensory experiences vary across different urban contexts and their implications for urban policy and planning. Additionally, a map with the 5 stops, possible routes, and points of interest is linked in the video description. Our hope is that participants will get an appreciation for sensory urbanism by learning how sensory experiences are integral to the fabric of urban environments, influencing everything from personal well-being to collective dynamics. It is time to know how Manchester feels like.
Throughout history, many ancient civilizations have viewed the senses as fundamental tools for understanding, or attempting to understand, the world around them. Building on this idea, scholars have proposed that cities should also be seen as sensory environments. Such environments produce distinctive smells, sounds, and tactile stimuli that carry symbolic meaning for those who experience them. In this context, Broughton Park marks the start of our journey, offering the chance to explore a historic neighborhood home to the largest Jewish community in all Greater Manchester. Manchester has the second largest Jewish population in Britain, with approximately 35,000 Jewish residents. The community's origins trace back to the crisis provoked by Nazi persecution in the 1930s and early 1940. At that time, Manchester's liberal reputation led to the establishment of the Home for Aged, Needy, and Incurable Jews, as well as the temporary shelter in Cheetham Hill in 1938, both of which became refugees for families arriving from Europe. Today, thousands of Jewish residents can be seen walking daily in the neighborhood's public spaces. Back in Broughton Park, experts have highlighted the importance of urban green spaces engaging all 5 senses: vision, sound, touch, smell, and taste, to provide a comprehensive and enriching user experience. Sensory diversity in urban parks significantly enhances visitor well-being, supports stress recovery, and encourages park usage. Consequently, planners and policymakers should strive to incorporate all the senses when designing new recreational areas. With this in mind, we invite you to consider how thoroughly the park can be enjoyed through all the senses. Pay attention to the sounds, the environment, and the scents around you, trying to uncover a new layer of sensory experience. Next, try to identify whether elements of the Jewish community intersect with this place. Are there features in the park or its surroundings that you can touch, see, or hear? Here's a hint. The community lacks restaurants or commercial establishments, contributing to a more familial atmosphere that may be perceived through the senses. Finally, be aware of time and how it influences the people you encounter in the streets: children, mothers, workers, and others. And consider how these temporal dynamics shape your sensory engagement with the environment.
As we have noticed, the senses can serve as a powerful set of tools for discovering the world around us. In this regard, the city center also offers endless possibilities waiting to be explored. This place embodies a 24-hour city, a concept conveying liveliness, joy, and activity at all hours. Furthermore, according to scholars, this dynamism can be experienced through the senses by walking and fully immersing oneself in a bustling environment that can suddenly feel chaotic and intense. Here, one might directly encounter the sounds of traffic and restaurants, as well as less pleasant smells like pollution or even urine. In 1844, the shocking conditions of Manchester's city centre led Engels to write, "The working men's dwellings of Manchester, no cleanliness, no convenience, and consequently, no comfortable family life is possible." For sure, there were some sensorial elements that drove Engels to write such description. However, 150 years later, UK regeneration programs introduced a sense of hope as people began to return to city centers as places where home, work, and leisure are interwoven. Today, the center is not only a space for recreation, but also an economic engine. To illustrate this, the Greater Manchester Combined Authority launched the GM Nighttime Economy Strategy, where states that this economy significantly contributes to Greater Manchester's prosperity, employing 464,000 people, which means 33% of the workforce. Now, we invite you to consider how the senses intersect with multiple identities, shaping our experiences of places. Due to economic growth, the city center has become highly valued, leading to rapid development. It is now common to see cranes building new structures and workers going about their daily routines. Notably, urban planning and city design have historically been dominated by men, while women have been displaced from the public spaces. Additionally, the city centre has a higher proportion of male residents than other parts of Manchester, with St. John's Garden showing the most significant difference, as only 33.9% of its population is female. It may be linked to the fact that 23 adult entertainment establishments in Manchester, listed on the Yelp webpage, are located in the city centre, seemingly related to sexual activities. With this in mind, look around you and consider whether a woman would feel safe in this space. Elements such as limited lighting, long and narrow alleys, overgrown vegetation, and poorly placed buildings can amplify feelings of insecurity. Excessive noise from traffic or construction can mask calls for help. Areas like markets, bus stops, or overcrowded spaces often heighten the risk of harassment. The absence of panic buttons, emergency call boxes, or visible police stations can further increase perceived vulnerability. By paying attention to these sensory clues, we become more aware of how space, gender, and safety intersect in shaping urban experiences.
It is time to visit Moss Side and discover how the senses not only play an important role in discovering the world around us, but also carry shared emotional meanings that can orient public policy. Researchers have studied, for instance, how senses, space, and emotions are deeply intertwined and shape one another. Building on this idea, social and formal institutions are crucial in shaping our sensory experiences. By designing and managing spaces, through planning, regulations, and norms, they indirectly guide our sensory preferences and influence how we feel and interact with our surroundings. This core principle of sensory urbanism was studied in pubs in Munich during the 19th century. At that time, the working class's strong taste for beer and the significance placed on breweries and taverns led authorities to closely regulate the production, distribution, and consumption of this beverage. As beer gained popularity across all social classes, these shared tastes helped lessen the emphasis on social distinctions. Much like Munich's 19th century breweries and taverns, Moss Side's eateries embody how vital shared sensory experiences are in shaping urban life and identity. This neighborhood is home to a large community identifying as Black, Black British, Black Welsh, Caribbean, or African. The Black presence in Manchester dates to the 1700s, and their arrival in Moss Side is recorded in the 1950s with the Windrush generation. Despite these long-standing roots, the neighborhood suffered violent riots in 1981, driven by economic struggles, police repression, harassment, and systemic racism. These events resulted in 150 arrests and significant damage. Despite the challenging past, the community has shown inspiring resilience, and each year since the 1970s, the community has held the Manchester Caribbean Carnival. For 2 days, the neighborhood comes alive, filled with music and the sense of food, celebrating Caribbean pride. Yet cultural expressions are not limited to the festival. Everywhere you look, culture leaves traces that can be smelled, touched, seen, and heard. With this in mind, we invite you to explore Moss Side and its selected sites of interest, allowing you to experience these historic blocks with all your senses engaged. Just as beer once united social classes in Munich, the tastes and sounds of Moss Side offer a window into the power of shared sensory experiences to bring people together, celebrate heritage, and shape urban identity.
It is time to move on to one of the most diverse neighborhoods in all of Manchester, with a large South Asian population. According to the latest census, in Longsight, 7 out of 10 residents are Muslim, and 73% identify as Asian, Asian British, or Asian Welsh. Additionally, this ward has the highest number of residents unable to speak English at all, 371 individuals. The presence of South Asian populations in the city dates back to the early 1930s, when Punjabi traders opened cafes for students and migrants. However, their arrival in Longsight began in 1971, as Bangladeshi people, forced to leave their countries due to conflicts, chose to settle there. Since then, their numbers have steadily increased. Walking through the streets, it is immediately evident how the Asian community influences the neighborhood. Supermarkets display signs in Bengali, Urdu, and Tamil, offering traditional spices. It is also easy to find South Asian sweet shops, grocery stores, and traditional bakeries, as well as clothing boutiques selling saris and shawls. What can you discover in these places through your senses? By simply walking, your eyes take in a lively, diverse landscape, and if you listen closely, you may hear prayers from a nearby mosque or traders speaking their native languages. In the heart of the community, you will encounter a fascinating Asian market. Considering the role of the senses, markets have been central to city life for the last 5,000 years, dating back to when Neolithic settlers produced surpluses to support ruling classes and enable trade. Since then, the sensory experiences have not changed much. You can taste samples of food or drinks offered by vendors, hear people haggling, music playing, or a seller calling out, and feel the texture of fruits, fabrics, or even a handshake to seal a deal. Which of these experiences can you identify in the Asian market? You may also notice various scents while walking among the different stalls. Sensory urbanism acknowledges the power of smell in shaping our understanding of cities. Sensory urbanists have described how unpleasant odors, known as urban miasma, have historically been prejudicially associated with poor sanitation and broader social issues like poverty and prostitution. A well-known example is found in Bong Joon-ho's Oscar-winning film Parasite. In one scene, poor is never mentioned. Instead, class differences are conveyed through body odor and scent, implying that social distinctions and prejudices can be perceived through smell without explicitly mentioning class. Now it is your turn to continuing exploring the surroundings.
We have arrived at our last stop, and by now you are expected to have developed a heightened level of sensitivity. You are encouraged to compare how you feel here with the places you previously visited and consider the main differences or similarities you observe. You probably have noticed differences in the landscape. Didsbury has a long history. It was a township before becoming part of the county borough of Manchester in 1904. During the Victorian era, it became a prosperous suburb as local landowners chose to settle there. Today, it remains one of Manchester's most affluent neighborhoods, with household incomes above the city's average. This pattern is evident as you walk through the residential area. Well-maintained three-story houses, green front yards, modern architecture, gated communities, secure apartments, and luxury or recently manufactured vehicles, to name a few. Now is the moment to discuss the concept known as the politics of perception. Scholars have proposed that sensory perceptions have played an important role in shaping social hierarchies and can help us understand political dynamics across history and cultures. Think, for instance, about how clothing textures and perfumes have been considered markers of class. Silk and linen differ from polyester or acrylic, and there was a time when purple was considered the color of loyalty. This clash of perception and power is visible today as well. Another scholar, for example, analyzes how a new noise control policy in São Paulo during the 1990s was contested by local groups who invoked individual freedoms and economic interests, such as those of bars or discos. This reflects how control over sensory experiences can be enforced differently depending on various public interests. Now it's your turn to be aware of your senses and reflect on the politics of perception. Compare all the sites you have visited, consider how the senses are contested, and think about the potential impacts on each community. Before we conclude, it is worth emphasizing that we are deeply aware of the ethical considerations surrounding urban walking tours, especially in areas with vulnerable or marginalized communities. With this in mind, we have strived to create a respectful, inclusive, and beneficial experience. We encourage participants to view our tours not as mere tourist activities, but as ethnographic journeys that deepen their understanding of the city's complex issues. Our goal is to foster meaningful insights into urban dynamics and broaden perspectives on the diverse ways we can connect with and discover the world around us.